I believe that web applications are going to be a key factor in Linux becoming a viable platform eventually. A lot of the industry is moving their business models from desktop software over to the web, and I think this is great news for Linux. Now, I'm not the only one who thinks this. In fact, I'm a little behind because Google has been trying to push this for years with their Chromebook platform and Chrome OS. And so far, it's been working out, I'd say, pretty successfully for Google because 4% of US operating system market share is now on Chrome OS. And yes, Chrome OS is technically a Linux distro, but nobody counts it as a Linux distro. But Chrome OS alone is taking out all of Linux's market share, unless this 7% unknown is mostly Linux, which wouldn't surprise me because a lot of Linux users run privacy tools. But the point is, the move to web apps will be very, very beneficial to Linux. Now, the biggest thing that web apps solve is it doesn't make sense for a lot of companies to make Linux ports. In the US, like I said, Linux is still less than 3% market share, and the technology stack behind Linux is entirely different from Windows, so you'd be having to completely rewrite your application essentially using a toolkit like a Qt or GDK. And for 3% market share, with an exception of the gaming space because of things like the Steam Deck, the Linux install base just isn't worth it for a lot of these professional apps, things like Photoshop, for example, especially because if you need to use a pro level app like that, you're just not going to make the switch to Linux because you need to get your work done. You can't run Linux. Now, for better or worse, a lot of the industry has been moving towards web-based software as a service models. So the software industry is slowly shifting over to these web-based models. One, as a business, it makes a lot more sense to have recurring revenue coming in, where you're getting more revenue coming in every single month for your software rather than someone just purchasing it one time and then maybe purchasing an upgrade to the software. Additionally, if you're building a web app, you can't pirate the app. There's going to be no piracy. If you want to push out an update, everyone's going to be getting it instantly. You're not going to be having to deal with some sort of transition from one version of the software to another. So for people building software, businesses like that, just the web-based model right now is a no-brainer. Additionally, you can just build once and your web app is going to work on Windows, Mac, Linux, Chrome OS. And you can even reuse some of your web infrastructure using tools like React Native to build a full mobile app. And then if you do want to eventually make a desktop app, you can reuse all that code again using an Electron app. Now, a lot of people don't like Electron apps. They do use quite a bit of RAM. But we're not talking about the consumer here, we're talking about businesses. Now, this does have some problems for the consumer, but again, we're not talking about this here. We're just talking about the viability of the web as a platform. And slowly over time, the web has been turning into the primary platform, with your operating system now essentially being a bootloader for your web browser. Now, a lot of huge apps have been moving to the web. You have tools like Microsoft Office, which is going all in on web first right now. Yes, if you're a power user, you may still prefer the desktop version of Microsoft Office, but the web version of Office, for the most part, for a lot of things you're going to want to do with Microsoft Office, it has pretty good feature parity. And the web version is going to give you a much better experience of things like collaboration, where multiple people can edit a document at the same time. And for that reason, most of the people in my university are using the web version of Office for that feature alone, rather than the desktop version. I'm not saying the experience is that good because they are trying to push Copilot everywhere and things like that, but that's not my point. The point is just the industry as a whole is moving to the web. Another example, Photoshop has a web version now. Now, this isn't going to replace desktop Photoshop for a lot of people, but for people who have Photoshop just to do some basic photo editing, maybe touch up their photos a bit, things like that, the web version works perfect for use cases like that. Again, a professional user isn't going to be moving to the web version of Photoshop, but I think Photoshop Web is ready for most consumer usage. There's also been a huge trend of new web applications that are web first. Google Workplace is a huge example. In my opinion, much better experience than Microsoft Office Web, but web apps like this, thanks to just progression in web technology, super fast, works super well. You can barely notice that you're using a web app if you're in a flow state doing your work. And the thing about web apps is they kind of just work. Another example is Notion. I did blur some stuff out here because I don't want to leak my videos, but I love Notion. I've been using it to manage development of my Linux distro StillOS. I have a whole production pipeline right here on YouTube where I just put all of my ideas that I have. Any potential idea that could eventually be a video goes in Notion, and then I'm able to plan it out for the next week and then keep track of the progress I've made on certain videos. And then another web tool I love is Figma. This PowerPoint presentation right here, it's not actually PowerPoint. This is actually running through Figma slides, and it's a super easy interface. I'm able to make slides for my videos very, very quick. And then I also like that the presentation goes through the browser, because if I want to reference something like I did earlier with the desktop market share, I have it in Zen browser right here on my toolbar, and then I can just quickly go, boom. It helps make my video production process very easy, very fast. Now, I'm not saying that we should be replacing all of our Linux native apps with web applications, because that's unneeded. Things like GNOME applications for certain tasks work great, and I do not want to replace those. But I do not really think a lot of the major distributions are taking advantage of these trends. There are a few, but not many. So I think Linux distributions should be paying attention more to this move in the software industry and be trying to make the web app experience on their distros as good as possible. Now, one distribution taking advantage of this is Linux Mint. So I have a little virtual machine here of Linux Mint. I didn't actually install it fully, but I just wanted to demo this one feature, so this works good enough for the demo. But they have this little web app tool right here where you can go in, enter all of the info you need for your web app, add an icon, things like that. And I made a simple one for YouTube, so we have a little YouTube web app right here. But just the problem is it doesn't really feel like a native app. Like if we go up here, you still have a full like Firefox tab bar right here, and it basically hacks together Firefox to kind of turn it into a web app. And if I just go to a random video right here, like I'm not actually trying to watch the video, but if I click on a external link, this ends up opening in its own web application, which is probably not what you want. I personally want this to open in my default browser. And there's also no back and forward buttons unless you go to this hidden Firefox thing right here. And here they are now, but it's just not that good of an experience, and it's even worse with other browsers. Now I'm just gonna quickly install Chrome into this virtual machine for a demonstration. One important thing is Firefox is not the de facto browser engine. Unfortunately, we're still living in a world where 80% of web browsers are using Chrome's engine, and that is what most of the current web apps and everything are targeting. So for a lot of web apps, you're going to have a much better experience on a Chromium based browser. Like it or not, that's just the world we're living in right now. And so now let me just remake that YouTube web app with a Chrome browser right now, because for real world use cases, that is what you're going to want to be using. And now if I go back to the Chrome based YouTube here, okay, this is just because I haven't opened Chrome yet, but what the heck is this? We have a broken window title bar right here. Hey, future me editing this video here, that window border issue was because of Wayland. I ran that demo in Wayland because I had some issues with the X session in that virtual machine, but now I'm using a different virtual machine software, so I got X working, and that window border issue doesn't happen, but you still have some of the other issues I'm about to mention. And I think it's important to still keep the Wayland issues in mind, because there are other applications using the same exact technology that have the same issues if you're on a Wayland desktop. But I just didn't want to be disingenuous and pretend like it's broken everywhere. Back to the video. There's no back and forward buttons at all. Okay, you can go back if with a right click. And now if I open a external link, now it is opening in a full window of Chrome right here, except window recognition of the desktop environment is actually bugged right here. So it's not even detecting an icon right now for the original YouTube web app. But then when we open Chrome right here, it's opening as a YouTube icon right here. And it's separate from if I open like an actual Chrome window. So just the window positioning is completely bugged, and this isn't a very good experience either. Now, I'm not completely trying to shit on Linux Mint. This is a very cool feature and a pretty useful feature for a lot of different web applications. And I would like to give Linux Mint huge props for actually recognizing this software industry trend and trying to take advantage of it to make it a better Linux distribution. So I'm not trying to completely shit on Linux Mint. This is a cool feature, but just it's not implemented in the way I want it to be implemented. And so I'm implementing it differently in my project, StillOS, which is currently in development. There's a preview out. The full release should be ready in about a month. Now, I didn't want this video to be an ad, but I'm just using this as a demo of what I think the web app experience on Linux could be like in the future for other distros. So we have a technology called SWI, which creates a Electron runtime for web applications here. And so with Electron, it's using a Chromium base, which makes it so most applications are going to run with the engine that they're made for. So I have Apple Music right here. DRM is supported, so it can actually play back my music, and it just works super well. It works as well as the Apple Music web app works completely. And it's super integrated in my system. It has its own app icon right here. You can hardly tell it's running in a web app. We also have our back and forward buttons here, and we have a title bar that's designed to emulate libweta perfectly. So yeah, there's some small differences from Electron limitations, like there's no rounded corners on the windows, but I think I did a pretty good job making it fit Adwaita design. If I open another web app here, I have Photopea. The system integration's slightly broken here, but that's just because I haven't added an icon for this particular web app just yet. But the Adwaita title bar I built is actually able to adapt to the website. So if I change the theme of Photopea here to be purple, as you can see, the title bar changes to purple too, if I change it to black. So this just makes the whole web app experience feel a lot more native and a lot more complete. I talked about how much I love using Notion, and I have a full Notion web app here that feels very native. So just a very good user experience. If I add a little hyperlink right here, it's actually going to open in my default browser and not in an instance of another web app. Overall, just a very good user experience for web applications. Now, the way this is working is I have a little .swy file here. This is actually just a YAML file. So here's one I made for Google Slides. So we have the main URL, which is what it's going to open when you open the web app. And we have a loud URL. So if you leave a allowed URL, that's when it knows to open your default browser. And then one of the problems is for logging in. Sometimes you have like OAuth enterprise logins and things like that. And this allowed URLs mechanism doesn't work for that. So if you're on a login URL, that's when it does allow external URLs for just in case you have like an Okta login for enterprise, and it will let you do that in the SWI window without it redirecting to your regular browser. Now, I haven't made enough web apps to actually demonstrate this feature yet, but this will be in the final version of StillOS. But there's a little ecosystem feature where, let's say I'm on Google Drive and I open something that is a allowed URL for Google Slides. It will actually open the Google Slides app and share your cookies so you have the same login. So web applications that function as a suite, such as the Google Workspace suite, are able to basically talk to each other, and it just feels like a super native experience. Now, I don't expect users to be writing full YAML files like this to get a web app working, and even things like trying to figure out what is the main URL and what URL should be allowed and what a login URL is. I don't expect people to figure that out. So my approach is inside of the software store, I'm going to just put a bunch of pre-made SWI applications. So with one click, you can install one of these web apps and it should work perfect for you. I would like to get this working on other Linux distributions too, but unfortunately there is a limitation with Electron where you are not able to set the window manager class for a window, which means I wouldn't be able to have any of the ecosystem features working, things like that. And so on StillOS, we are actually patching GNOME in order to get this functionality working, and this is not a simple GNOME extension. This is like actual C patches to Mutter. However, I'm gonna be linking this issue I made back in March of 2025 to Electron in the description of this video. Do me a huge favor and go like this issue, and if this actually gets added into Electron, then I will be able to port this feature to other Linux distros, and that's part of why I'm making this video. Let's make the web app experience on Linux better together and get this technology out to the Linux world. Anyways, thank you for watching this video. If you thought this was interesting, you might like my video on how to make Linux mainstream, where I kind of go over this topic, but a bunch of other topics all combined on a strategy on how we could make a Linux distro that actually goes out to become a mainstream thing. I'm trying to get this channel going again, so leave a like and subscribe, and I'll see you in the next video.